I've had a couple of books on Shakespeare published in Spanish editions, and they've sold quite well in, well, the book The Quest for Shakespeare has sold quite well in Spain, and my book Through Shakespeare's Eyes is being published soon in a Spanish edition. I've also had quite a few other books on other literary figures published in Spain and Spanish editions. So I think I'm known as a writer on English writers, including specifically a writer on Shakespeare. So the publisher of the Spanish edition of Sir Thomas More asked if I would write the introduction, and I was obviously honoured and flattered to be asked, and was more than happy to agree. Well, it's important, I think, historically, for two reasons. First of all, it's an eyewitness account fairly close to the time of St Thomas More's martyrdom. Within sort of 50 or 60 years of St Thomas More's martyrdom, this play was written. So it allows us an insight into what those not that long after his death thought of him. So that is interesting in that way. But more importantly, it's known that Shakespeare had a role in the writing of the play, and it's also known that other contemporary playwrights of Shakespeare also had a hand in writing the play. So it's this collaboration between some of the best known playwrights of the time, including, of course, arguably the greatest playwright who ever lived, makes this a very, very important document. Anthony Munday is known to be a very, very anti-Catholic person. He was responsible for the execution of several Catholic priests by betraying them to the authorities. Therefore, it seems unthinkable to me that Anthony Munday would have written a play which is quite clearly sympathetic to a Catholic martyr. The interesting and intriguing thing is, why is Anthony Munday's handwriting on the play at all? Because certainly the bulk of the play is written in his handwriting. And I think he was used as a scribe. I think that, you know, he's quite clearly an opportunist. When Queen Elizabeth dies, people genuinely thought that the pendulum was going to swing towards Catholicism. People such as Anthony Munday, who are opportunists, were worried that the reputation of being anti-Catholic was not going to be very good for their future success in society, so they wanted to be seen to be sympathetic. So I think he agreed to be part of the efforts to get the work past the state censor, and because he was known to be anti-Catholic, he would be an ideal person for that. This wasn't just a work of Catholic propaganda, this was a historical work about St Thomas More. But of course it's pro-Catholic. I can't believe that Anthony Munday wrote it, but he clearly was keen to be part of the project along with some of these other writers, because at the time it was really thought, okay, Catholicism is making a comeback here in England, and we don't want to be seen on the wrong side. We want to be on the winning side. So I think that's why he's involved. It's an act of cynicism, but I don't believe he wrote the play. Well, first of all, we know that Shakespeare was involved in the writing of the play. Some of the plays written in his own handwriting, and most scholars are quite happy to accept that is Shakespeare's own work. Many other scholars see other parts of the play which aren't written in his handwriting as being so stylistically like Shakespeare, it has to be written by Shakespeare. So there's other parts of the play not in his handwriting that we believe was written by Shakespeare. So the question is, how much of the play is written by Shakespeare? Of the various collaborators, the various handwritings that appear on it, Shakespeare is the only known Catholic. And this is a pro-Catholic play. I believe actually that this was a play that Shakespeare wrote much earlier and knew it would never get past the state censor until the death of Queen Elizabeth. After the death of Queen Elizabeth, with the accession to the throne of King James, there was a hope it could get past the censors, and I think that Shakespeare got together with other people to try to make it as, should we say, unthreatening to the secular reader, the censor, Sir Edmund Tilney, as possible. And so that's why the collaboration, but I think it was originally worked by Shakespeare that had other things done to it, but the bulk of it is Shakespeare's work. It would have been unthinkable and illegal to publish and perform a play in Elizabethan or Jacobean England that was pro-Catholic in the sense of including overt Catholic theology, and particularly overt Catholic theology which opposes the established Anglican Church. So everybody in Elizabeth's reign and King James's reign knew why St. Thomas More was martyred. He was martyred for defending the position of the Catholic Church against the attacks upon Catholicism by Henry VIII. So it's not a question of people not knowing that St. Thomas More held that position, but you could not say it because it was against the law to bring in contemporary religion and politics on the stage, specifically and particularly Catholicism. It would be like having a play written in the Soviet Union during the reign of Joseph Stalin that attacked Stalin. It were clearly, not only would it not be published, the playwright would be put in prison. The same situation prevailed in Shakespeare's time. So there was never going to be overt Catholicism in terms of theology, but merely writing a play about the Catholic martyr who stood up for the church against King Henry VIII is a pro-Catholic statement, it's a pro-Catholic play. This is perhaps one of the strongest objections to Shakespeare's authorship, but it only holds water, as it were, as an objection if we're assuming that the play was written at about the time that it was presented to Sir Edmund Tilney, which I think most scholars agree was between 1603 and 1604, immediately after the death of Queen Elizabeth and the accession to the throne of King James I. But Shakespeare, it's widely believed, wrote plays for recusant Catholic audiences. We know that some of the wealthier Catholic families, defiantly Catholic families, had their own players, their own performers, and that plays were performed to recusant audiences. With Shakespeare's Catholic background, his Catholic parents, the other facts we know about Shakespeare's Catholicism, it's very likely that he began in his early career by writing plays for these Catholic audiences. And although, yes, Sir Thomas More is not of the quality of Shakespeare's greatest plays, such as Hamlet and Macbeth and King Lear and Othello, it certainly is of a similar quality to his early plays, such as the King Henry history plays. So there's no problem here in seeing this as being written by Shakespeare if we understand it was written about 10 or 15 years before this effort to get it past the censors. On the understanding, of course, that before that it would have been unthinkable and impossible for Shakespeare to have got that past the censors. He had to wait for Queen Elizabeth to die before any possibility of that. So that's why it's an early play, which explains why it's not of the quality of other plays that Shakespeare was writing around that time.